Greetings, folks. Welcome back to the Jason Damico Show. Thank you for tuning in on YouTube or listening, Spotify, iTunes, iHeart, Simplecast, all of those great platform providers. And we've got a very special guest on the show, as always. Our guest is the founder and executive director of the crowdfunding charity program Sound Effects. She holds a doctorate in biochemistry from the Bauman Gray School of Medicine of Wake Forest University. She trained as a postdoctoral fellow at the National Cancer Institute and the Lombardi Cancer Center of Georgetown, where she was granted the Spohr Fellowship Award for breast cancer research. She also specialized in intellectual property and technology transfer management while at the Ludwig Institute for Cancer Research. Please welcome to the show my good friend, Dr. Mona Jhaveri.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
Well, thanks for taking the time to be here. And I asked you to come on. You know, usually we have artists as guests and anybody kind of like in the entertainment industry, but you've got quite an overlap. And I think you're going to have some really interesting insight for the show and just, you know, what you do and also talking about sound effects and how that kind of ties into the circle of the entertainment industry and the arts. But it's just great to have you here.
Thank you.
So I want to start with your beginning stages real quick and kind of talk about how you got into the field of biochemistry. Maybe if you have a few minutes of just kind of diving into the early years of research and even probably, you know, before attending school for it.
Yeah, I think, people ask me that question a lot, and I don't have sort of that inspiring story like somebody passed away from a particular disease and I wanted to figure that, I wanted to work. I don't have sort of that emotional pull. It was more, I enjoyed the sciences. It was something that I naturally progressed in. I majored in biochemistry as an undergrad, and then I applied and got into graduate school at Bowman Gray School of Medicine. And then it was there that I specialized in cancer. And again, not for reasons because I had been affected directly or indirectly. But in fact, when we landed in graduate school, they give us three choices. You do research either in cancer, in AIDS, or heart disease. And of course, none of us, in fact, had any particular, reason to do anything because we were all young. We were in our 20s. So I just chose cancer because everyone else was choosing heart disease or AIDS. And I thought I'd be different. And the labs were located on a different floor. And I thought, I think I'll probably like working on the upper floors rather than the lower floors. It was really just that simple and banal. But in time, as I started learning about the study of cancer, which is called oncology, I started falling in love with it as an academic. And from there, I went on to work at the National Cancer Institute. And really the study of it inspired me to continue and to be a voice for research, for new innovations. And really, quite honestly, as a researcher, you're very isolated from the patients. We don't interact with them. Yet when I was at Bowman Gray and when I was at the National Cancer Institute, in both instances, the research labs were on the same floor and sharing the same building with the hospital. So on the one hand, we were all in the same space, but on the other hand, we were isolated. And what we did in the lab, it was never clear to us was going to do anything for the folks on the other side of the building that were battling for their lives in the hospital. So I saw there that firsthand just the deep disconnect of people working on understanding the disease or on solutions with the people that were actually trying to fight the disease. So that was a bit of my journey and my understanding of something's wrong with this picture.
Right. That's, yeah, I see, you learn something new every day. I never even knew that there was a disconnect.
Yeah, there's a big one. And I think for Sound Effects, which is the charity that I launched, that was the idea. We need to bridge this disconnect. We need to figure out how to get people who care, want to see change, to actually get around and behind those that are working in the laboratories or on new ideas, and vice versa. We need people in academia that are skilled in the study of cancer to be out there speaking to people about what's going on, what are we doing, where are we, where are we succeeding, where are we struggling. And I will say, in this moment of the pandemic where Dr. Fauci has emerged as a leader of our public in a way, I mean, this is big for us because Dr. Fauci is someone who in my field, we all know, we all respect. But to see him as a public figure now and a leader is putting our field now on a map that it never used to be. And Sound Effects wants to see more of that. We want more leaders, and the role, sort of what a lot of scientists and innovators are doing, and there's so many of them, and they're so creative, and their journeys are really tough in some instances. The public is unaware, and again, we want to bridge this divide.
Well, let's talk about Sound Effects real quick then. So you established this entity a few years back. It's 6 or 7 years now.
Yeah, it was. I would say we launched it in 2014. I was thinking about it like in 2012, and we were filing the nonprofit papers and doing all like the paperwork. And then in 2014, I formally launched it. But again, when you launch an organization, you're often relaunching and you're tweaking it, and you're building it with the times and learning as you go. And so while it's been around, it's been in a phase of constant building.
Well, you guys have done a tremendous effort, over $90,000 worth of funding so far.
Thank
And
you.
I think it's really interesting in the article. I'm going to kind of paraphrase here, but it's pretty much exact what was written. You were first going to approach celebrities for merging with Sound Effects, but that ended up not being the case. You dropped the idea in favor for emerging artists, and I'm going to leave it up to you at this point to kind of discuss why that was. You say it in the article, but I'd love to kind of hear even a little bit more on that, because I think that's really interesting that you chose to go the emerging artist route.
Well, let me back up a little bit. So let me just even talk about music in general.
Sure.
And sort of music as a vehicle to reach the people, to create change, to spread a positive message. So like I said, before I launched, through my training, I understood there was a disconnect. When I launched Sound Effects, I knew way back that the public isn't aware of what we do as researchers, but is also not aware of how discoveries even make it to them, and who's involved, and what role, who plays what role. And biotech, which is a field that's relatively new, is the field of just doing that. It takes discoveries that were done in the lab and advances them through steps of commercialization and helps them to get into the clinic. And from there, it's oftentimes pharma companies or big diagnostic companies that will take these new innovations and take it to the people. So innovation is a bit of like the relay race. It's like passing the baton, where it begins at research, and research comes up, researchers come up with discoveries, and then they pass the discoveries on to biotech innovators who start up companies, biotech companies,
Right.
and then the biotech companies advance them, and then they pass them on to pharma, and pharma then takes it to the public. This idea of innovation is really a journey, and it's wrought with challenges, and it's full of failure. It's seriously difficult, and I think in this moment of pandemic, we can see even a vaccine that we all badly want, or many of us don't really want. The earliest is that I'm hearing is like December, and that would be record pace, because vaccines normally take 4 or 5 years at best. Now they're saying a year, unheard of. So all to say is that this is what I knew the public was absent from, and in terms of how things happen and who plays what role. And so when I launched Sound Effects, and we launched it as a charity where the people could get behind an innovation that they cared about or that they thought was important. Maybe it's a new diagnostic for breast cancer. Maybe it's a new way to treat pancreatic cancer. Whatever it was, we wanted a platform that was transparent and where people could decide where their dollar goes. Because normally you can't do that, right? You walk, you run for life, you go to galas, you plant trees, whatever you do,
Right.
You pay the money to some institution, and the institution then does something with your dollar, but you're not often clear how much of it is going to the programs. And if indeed, even if all of it goes to the programs, what comes out of it? Is anyone's life saved, helped, elongated, improved? We're just not aware. And that's not the way charity has run. And ever since sort of the advent of Kickstarter and GoFundMe now, and social media platforms, now we have a way to directly approach the public, and for the public to directly give and be that decision maker. So that's what we wanted Sound Effects to do. But the problem for us was that, how do we tell the public what's really going on? How do we even reach them? And that's where we thought of music. Why don't we make music the vehicle to reach the masses and to be our torch for change? And of course, music and charity has existed forever, right? It's not uncommon that you go to a gala and a celebrity performs. I mean, this happens, right? And we all heard of Bond concerts and concerts that have clearly raised money. So charity and causes have existed. And when we first launched, we thought we would do the same. Let's bring on celebrities, let's figure out. But actually, we had issue with that over time. First of all, it was hard to reach these celebrities. Second of all, we'd have to pay the celebrities. And then that sort of defeats the purpose, because all our money would be going to pay them versus going to support the innovation or to support the operation. And in the end, it was never clear whether they cared or not. And that makes a big difference to our platform, but also to the public, right? So we started working with emerging artists, and we were enlightened because we found emerging artists had fan bases and were very intimate with their fans, who had direct reach with their fans. We found emerging artists were hungrier, they cared more, they were more generous, and probably more in line with our values as a charity. And we thought to ourselves, having more emerging artists could be more impactful. You know, having a group of emerging artists could be more impactful than the single celebrity, if you will. So we saw value in numbers and in attitude. And so that's why we chose to work with emerging artists to really help us raise awareness, raise funds. And also, the other part that I think became very important is a crowd platform is meant to democratize decisions, right? So right now, if the cure for cancer arises, you wouldn't know about it, or you wouldn't have the ability to support it or not support it. It would be taken on by investors and pharmaceutical companies, and whatever lands, in CVS or Walgreens, or at your bedside when you're in the hospital, that's what you get. You really don't have a say. And that's the truth. But on a crowdfunding platform, the idea is to give people a say in what moves forward.
Right.
So that's what and that's what we wanted to do. And we also thought that as a platform where we're democratizing, what moves forward, having emerging artists was a lot easier than having celebrities, because celebrities are a very top-down approach. They could sway everyone to, if they wanted a thing for breast cancer, they would sway everybody, right? But it would be a different thing to have the collective voice of the crowd, where the masses want a new screening tool for cancer, or whatever it may be. And so I think there's something to be said about reaching the masses through a grassroots way versus a top-down way. And that was the other that was the other reason to reach and to embrace the emerging artists for sound effects.
Sure. Yeah. And you talk about the valley of death, as far as passion money. I thought that was really interesting as well, and that kind of ties into this, but not that you need to elaborate any more on that. But I thought that was another interesting bit that kind of goes into the psychology of fundraising and doing it in a way where people really are going to be able to get behind the platform, so to speak,
Right. And the Valley of Death is critical, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that in fact is the reason why sound effects exists. And as a researcher, I became well aware, and all of us are, that we do innovate a lot. There are a lot of great ideas. Those ideas do end in discoveries. Many of them are patent protected by our universities or government labs. And yet many of them sit on shelves and go nowhere.
Right.
They don't actually move. And this is to the detriment of the public. And the public is, again, not aware that their very tax dollars that are supporting research and development are in fact producing, but then they get stuck and they get bottlenecked at the moment of discovery, because nobody wants to take them forward, in part because they can't raise the critical funding to do this. And in our industry, we call this place the Valley of Death, which is a metaphorical place, and it's where the great ideas go to die, not because they're bad ideas, but or the science is bad, but because they lack the critical funding.
So you're saying, and I'm not saying that you're saying this. From what I'm hearing, it's possible that the cure has already been found, but it never progressed because there was lack of funding.
Yeah, 100%. It's possible that there's tons of really important solutions for our health that are sort of sitting on shelves, never to move forward, never to help anybody, simply because they lack the funding to prove their principle and advance. And sound effects is tackling this head on through our platform. And we want all these ideas on our platform, and we want the crowd to get around them. Because if the government isn't, or investors aren't getting around them, or pharma's not getting around them, at minimum, we want to give opportunity for the people to get around them. And so that's been our goal. And I have to say, it's lofty, it's big, it's hard, but it's all moving in the right direction for us.
It's very commendable, for sure. I want to talk about entrepreneurship real quick, because that obviously plays a huge part in what you and the organization are doing. And if you want to touch on patents, you're more than welcome to, although that's a whole, I'll just be totally honest with you, that is a whole that is a
Megillah.
whole like sidebar that I am not well acquainted with. And I know that patent law, and especially in the medical field, it's a whole other animal. But yeah, I mean, just entrepreneurship, how much of it really is that at the end of the day? Because it sounds to me like a majority of what you do is really, it stems from that standpoint.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's interesting, um, because entrepreneurs and their journeys are not all the same.
Right.
And I think in the what we call in the life sciences, people that are advancing um, health solutions that are like therapies and diagnostics and vaccines and these types of things, this is a very complex field, if you know what I mean. So it first of all, it takes teams, a multidisciplinary team. Many of the folks on the team must have PhDs or MDs or higher degrees, right?
Right.
It takes a ton of cash, a ton of time. Failure is high. I mean, it's everything's against you. And what's so interesting, I think, when you delve into entrepreneurs working on these types of solutions, their stories are as heart-wrenching as even the people that they're trying to help. Meaning the entrepreneurs they don't take salary. They're super accomplished people, but they believe in their innovation so much that they're going to give up everything. They're not going to take salary for 3 to 5 years or something. They're going to mortgage their home twice over. They're going to use the monies that were saved for kids' college tuitions. We're now going to go into boosting the startup. They don't take vacations. They don't this. They don't that. I mean, they too go through enormous sacrifice, and in the end, no one knows who they are. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that in a certain way, I see them as the heroes, sort of behind the scenes. On the one hand, they're sort of at the forefront of helping us battle disease, but on the other hand, they're unknown and underfunded. And so again, at Sound Effects, like we want to shed light on these folks. We want the public to really know who's behind development, and to know their stories. And I think, too often for charity, we hear the stories of the people that suffer disease, and those have been heart-wrenching. And I guess for Sound Effects, we don't want to keep focusing on the same people that went through chemo or went through, other very difficult treatments and made it or didn't make it. We actually want to focus on the people who are working on solutions and maybe their personal stories. And so we see that as refreshing, and we want their stories to give our public hope as well. So I think, so that's where we are with that. And I think on the topic of patents, it's very important to understand that patents are in fact the asset that we speak of when we move from a discovery to a biotech to a pharma. Because if the patents aren't valuable, then in fact, the innovation will never make it to the public. And it's got to go, the innovation and the movement from discovery to a real solution has to be grounded in protected with patents. Because this is our system. And I have to say, a system that, while it's not perfect, it's something I think we should all be proud of, because I think just where I sit in the United States, we have a very entrepreneurial culture. And that's why as we sit here in the pandemic, I'm super hopeful that something will break, because there's just no shortage of great ideas and people working so hard to make things happen. And I don't feel that's the same for other places in the world. I think United States, we truly are a culture of innovation.
That's a great perspective to have, and I agree with you. It's and it translates into so many industries. People just having to, I mean, everybody's just scrambling right now, especially in the entertainment world. Everything is just totally changed. Live shows, obviously, we have no idea when they're actually going to be up and running again. Speaking of which, you guys have a couple of really strong relationships with Republic Records, Reverb Nation. We had Lou Playa on the show earlier this year, so I thought that was a funny coincidence. But yeah, would love to talk about. And you also say creating an incentive for the artists. You're really creating a win-win symbiotic type of relationship. If you want to elaborate a little bit on that as well, and how artists are benefiting from sound effects.
Yeah, that was the idea. How do we create a real ecosystem that's going to work for everybody, and bridge together our worlds that have never met before, right? The artists, the innovators, and then the people who want to see change, right? And fans and all of that. Like, how do we really make this happen? And incentives, I think, are key, not just for the artists, but for everyone. And just to preface everything, I am not an artist myself. I have had no network in the music industry. I don't even know how. People always ask me, like, why music? I don't know. It just so happened that it happened this way. And I actually had to knock on doors after door after door before one or two opened, and they did. So it's a testament to, if you really believe in something, they will more often than not be someone on the other side of that door that will open it. But there were plenty that shut the door, that's for sure. So with that, yeah, with Republic, we have a relationship with them, but also, as you said, Reverb Nation, and also Vivo is another area that has been very helpful. And so the idea is, if we're going to create a platform where we're going to have outreach through artists, we want to give artists something that they can capitalize on as well. And so, by the way, as I'm a scientist, so I started testing, like, okay, what can we do such that the artists would work with us and want to work with us and do this justice? And I didn't know, and it wasn't always intuitive. I thought, okay, maybe we have some performance opportunities, but I learned, well, it can't just be any performance opportunity. It's got to be something that the artists care about, or something that would give them exposure. I thought, well, could it be radio? Because I thought, at first I thought, well, maybe radio, but I thought, well, no one listens to the radio. But then I learned that artists like radio. So it was just this trial and error, and then landing on Republic, and they agreed, say, okay, if you do a challenge, we'll meet with your artists who win the challenge. And so that was, and I realized, oh, that really was motivating. So these are the kinds of conversations that I have had, and am still having, and still seek, is how do we create these challenges? Because that's really what this was all about. We want the artists to be our influencers, our super participants. And so we need to come up with a program to do this. And so we created a challenge, kind of like the ice bucket, but not quite. Here, our challenge is, we wanted to have them recurring, as something we do so many times a year. But in our challenge, they're online challenges, or online fundraising challenges, where every artist who aligns with sound effects gets a page on our platform. And then we launched this challenge, and we call it Music Beats Cancer. But the idea is that the artists who raise the most, we're going to get something that's unique. And in the last challenge, the artists that raised the most were going to perform at a showcase at South by. And we got a lot of good response with that. And so with Reverb, we put our challenge, Reverb helps us sort of blast the challenge out to artists through emails. And that's really helpful, because we got a lot of folks applying or submitting to participate. And what's really great with Reverb is that they kind of do some A&R, so that helped me sort of find the artist that to join our platform. So that's how we do outreach for artists. And then once the artists get on our platform, they can opt to sign up for the challenge. And then once the challenge starts, artists have 4 weeks to raise money. And there may be 10, 15, 20 artists, and hopefully in future there could be 100, that are all participating in this challenge. And as they're participating, everyone's tweeting, talking, hashtagging. And so we're sort of taking advantage of the social media algorithms. And my hope was, well, everybody's fans can sort of cross-pollinate even during the challenge, right? So the challenge is creating exposure for the artist, but also for sound effects. And it was really working. It was driving traffic to our site, and this was also really good. And then the artists that then win, again, would perform. And the idea is that they'd be the showcase, or they would meet with Republic Records, or what we're also trying to do in this day of virtual, sort of now doing everything virtual, is to have an event where the artist can, the winning artist can open for one of Republic's signed artists. But again, it will all be done virtually through a live stream. So that was an idea that we thought was really cool, because again, we're cross-pollinating fans, we're creating exposure. We are all at distance and being safe. And in an era where the music industry has been hit so hard, our thing is, how do we continue to give exposure to these artists that are caring about our mission? So that's one way. And we also launched Music Beats Cancer live stream, which is something we want to do on an ongoing basis each month, where artists can participate, do a song, and make this a virtual showcase, and maybe bring on other groups. And even some of my more recent conversations is, how do we share this with maybe advertisers or sponsors that might be looking for artists, as a way to give them opportunities. So it's a time to be creative, really, for everyone.
For sure. I want to ask you real quick your perspective on the art versus science of research and medicine. Your thoughts on that?
When you say the art versus the science on research and medicine, are you saying that much of the science is also a bit of an art, or
I'm not, that's why I'm asking. I'm not sure. Just to get your perspective on it, because a lot, I've heard that there's usually some sort of artistic, creative nature in the field for innovation, but also we're dealing with science, and science is science.
Yeah. No, it's a great question, actually, and it's interesting. And I do here's my thought. I think science is highly creative. It's highly, and if you're willing to use creative and art as an interchangeable word, then yes. Because what happens is, as scientists, we start to unearth how things work. How does the cell work? Why are people suddenly becoming resistant to chemo? Okay, what's happening? What's happening at the molecular level? What's happening at the cellular level? What's happening at the immunological level? We've been able to really just delineate this and make it more and more clear, right? So this has been the role of researchers. And through that comes ideas. Oh, okay, so I see that now it looks like these tumor cells are figured out how to hide from the immune system. Wait, maybe we can expose the tumor cells by manipulating them, on a molecular basis, or maybe we can alter certain gene sequences that might make them more resistant, or might make the immune system more able to go after our cancer cells. I mean, there's all kinds of tools and techniques, but that's where the leap of the creative mind needs to jump in, if you know what I mean.
Right.
That's why I think that highly creative people are What's really funny in my world in science and innovation, I meet so many people that are also musicians.
Wow.
Ever since I launched sound effects, I'll be sitting at a meeting and somebody at the meeting would say, you know what, I'm also a jazz pianist, or I'll take part in an orchestra. I meet some really accomplished musicians that are also accomplished scientists and innovators. Right. So I think that there's something to be said about that. And oftentimes as creators, we're less good at being, what's the word? So maybe we're less good at sort of hardcore academics. Maybe we're less good at books, being book smart, but we're better at being creative. And I think that, unfortunately, our system tends to concentrate scientists and the people who do really good at math and physics and some of the hard sciences, right? But that's a problem because, in fact, we're going to be missing out on great creators who maybe didn't excel in the math and sciences, but can really excel at the creative level of science. So I think there is something to be said about how the two come together. And that's why I like to think of biotech innovations a bit like artists, emerging artists. Like
Wow.
they're in the rough, and they need to keep getting better and being more refined before they get noticed. In both cases.
Right. Yeah. I took a biological anthropology class in college, as it was required, and it was wow. I mean, I've just that little entry level, course. I have a lot of respect for you folks in that whole bio field.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't know how
And
you do it.
It's so easy to get stuck in your four walls. Even the best of us get stuck in our thinking, and so there's something to be said about bridging. And I do this all the time. Like I watch what other people are doing in other industries, and I try to figure out, can we adapt that to what we do as scientists and innovators? You look at other platforms that are going digital or that they're hitting the masses. Can we use them? Can we capitalize on what others have done and augment what we do in the healthcare world? And I think there's a lot to be said there, because I feel like so much of academia is sitting in the dinosaur years, and so much of biotech is also in how we do things is sitting in the dinosaur years. And one of the reasons when I launched sound effects, it was hard because it was hard for me to get this into the public because the public didn't understand what biotech is, but it was equally hard to get biotech innovators on the platform because they were just so scared of the public. They were so scared. How can the public understand what we're doing? This is so complex. I don't know, but we're going to make it happen. We're going to figure out how to talk our talk in a way that people can get it. Why not? We buy computers and we have to look at Pentium chips and megahertz, and we go in other complex areas and we make it happen. We've got to make it happen in biotech.
Yeah. Especially, and I can't really speak for the biotech community, but obviously somebody who I've got a business degree and from an academic standpoint, yeah, I 100% agree with you. The way the academic system is set up in general, I don't know if it's completely up to date. I think there's some obsolete corners.
Yeah, and I do believe that in this moment of a pandemic, where we are vulnerable is starting to crack and show up big time. Well, in how we think and in many ways.
Let's talk about the pandemic for a little bit while we're on it. I don't really have any talking points on it. The only talking point I ever have on COVID is just for artists when they're on the show is future plans / COVID. Because I
Right.
always ask everybody, what are you doing? What are you doing? How are you combating this personally? How are you dealing? How are you coping with it? And we've actually had folks on the show that they've had family members that had COVID, or they think they had it, even though it was a false positive or false negative or whatever it is. Um, so it just your thoughts on it, kind of, especially with your expertise in the field. What do you think?
I think these are remarkable times. I really do, because it's like the one thing that has bound us all together, a virus, where we all have the potential to get infected because no one has ever seen this particular virus.
Right.
And so what has become very clear, like I said, are our vulnerabilities, and our strengths too, and the things that we are attached to and that we may not really need. Like, I'd rather be sitting with you in person, but where we stand now, we don't even need to. We have other ways to connect. So that's what I think, and I also, from the perspective of sound effects, I feel that this has shone a light on people who are working on solutions, and just how badly we rely on healthcare solutions for our everyday life. It used to be, maybe in the early 1900s, the average lifespan was 40 years. The average lifespan is you'd live 40 years.
Right.
Today, it is, in the United States, it's in the 80s, 80, maybe closer to 90, maybe it's mid 80s. So we've doubled in a period of 100 years plus. We've doubled the lifespan in this country, and in others as well. And you ask, well, why? Well, my answer would be a large part of it is because we have better healthcare. We have more solutions for issues. We've had, all kinds of things. We can do transplants. We can do open heart surgery. We can, people with cancer in particular are surviving longer. There are solutions for so many things. And yet, all that being said, there's hundreds of diseases where we still don't have anything for. Hundreds of them, including cancer. I think cancer is not one disease. Cancer is hundreds of diseases, right? And there's still so many cancers that we can't solve. And you don't really feel it until you're faced with it directly, right? You don't feel that some rare cancer, you don't worry about some rare cancer because it's not affecting you or someone you love. But then those people who in fact are directly affected by it, well, they have no solutions. They're just dealing day by day. In this current day, in COVID, we're all feeling it. Even though we may not have been affected, we all feel it because we know that we're vulnerable. So I think this is again going to become the era of biotechnology. How fast can we develop tools such that we can get back to our normal life, whatever that normal life was? That's where I see things going. Like I said, as where I sit, and I am a lot of innovators knocking on my door to figure out how they can get on sound effects platform because they have some idea that needs to be funded. So I sit in a space of hope, of real hope.
I'll ask you this real quick. What, from your vantage point, and this you could take a whole day to answer. So I know going into this that you may have to condense it. What do we know versus what do we not know with the progress that has been made thus far in the community.
One thing for sure is we know that the social distancing works. I mean, I think we already knew it worked, but as in other pandemics like the Spanish flu, but today we know that all these precautions that we're taking are helping, because we certainly see a decline in positivity. We see a decline in deaths and hospitalizations. We are seeing that. And in some states, it's really going down. In other states, it's not. It's rising. But we do know that that even simple things like distance works.
Right.
So there's that. There now are a lot of tests there are tests that have come out, and there's more that are in development. I think what we don't know is whether we're going to have a vaccine or not. We're all hopeful that it will happen, but it may not. I mean, there are diseases where we just cannot make vaccines for, or we just haven't been able to. So that's a bit of a scary thing, because if we don't have a vaccine, then we certainly need interventions. And when I say interventions, we need medicines. So when we do get sick, we have them on hand in emergency rooms. So there's all of those, there are a lot of tools that are going to surface. They're not there yet, but they're promising. And again, the hope is that we will have a vaccine by December, in the earliest case. And I mentioned that this is a record pace, right? Because we usually don't see vaccines this quickly. But I feel happy, at least in knowing that there are things I can do as a person to mitigate my risk.
What are your thoughts? Same thing. What do we know and what do we not know with cancer? As far as and again, that's a monolithic question. So I don't you don't need to get into crazy detail, but just a quick summary.
Yeah, in a nutshell, I think with regards to cancer, what's funny is cancer is also a bit of a moving target, and it used to be that cancer was something just for older people, and it really was true that as a young person you wouldn't get cancer. That would be very rare. But then things changed, and I see younger people presenting themselves with, presenting with other cancers like colon cancer. We're starting to see in people in the 30s. We're seeing rare cancers becoming a little more common, like pancreatic cancer. One thing we do know, that certain cancers that are caught early, we know we can cure them for the most part. Whether that be breast cancer, ovarian cancer. We also know that there's a lot of cancers we can't catch early. We don't have the tools. And we also know that when we catch them late, there's not much we can do. And that's something we've known, and it's existed, and we are trying to figure out how do we either A, detect them early, or B, come up with new paradigms where we can fight them better. And that's where the launch of immunotherapies has come into play, where normally in the past 40 years or more, cancer has been fought. I mean, even say into the early 1900s, we've been fighting cancer with surgery, with chemo, with radiation. That's been the forefront tools.
Right.
But not much has changed, if you can believe. Even with all the knowledge we have, not much has changed. And it's only been in the past, say, few years, I would say, I wouldn't even say a decade, a few years, where the paradigm of immunotherapies is surfacing, where we understand that somehow cancer has evaded our own immune system's ability to flag it and destroy it. And that has taken a while to understand this. And we've slowly, and even the innovators I work with are coming up with ways is how do we fool the immune system, or fool cancer for that matter, or how do we manipulate the immune system such that it can now see cancer and flag it, find it, destroy it. And this is an entirely new paradigm. it's not dealing with chemicals and side
It's almost like a
effects.
prophylactic or preventative
The
standpoint.
preventative
Like,
would be a vaccine, but I don't think we do that for prevention, right? So I think that was popular at one point, is can we come up with a cancer vaccine? And that being said, we actually do have one for cervical cancer, Gardasil, right? So that's out and been has had some positive data and results on that. And so people are having you can have your son and daughter vaccinated with Gardasil starting at the age of 10 or 12. So that's there, and people are seeing real results from that. But that cancer is cervical cancer is because of a virus, HPV.
right,
So cancers and their causes can be all very different. Some cancers can be virus induced. Some of them are genetic
mutations
issues,
or
mutations. Some are just random. We have no idea why. Some are hormonal. And so that's the other part of cancer. It's like to understand the root and cause can sometimes be helpful in the prevention or the attack of it. And this is, we don't know, is this environmental? I mean, there's just so many reasons. And again, like I said, cancer is complex. There's not just one cancer, there's hundreds. But one thing that is common to all cancers is that the cell that it affects becomes immortal and starts to divide without control. And that is a hallmark of all cancers. And when that happens, it has all kinds of effects on us.
This is kind of an out there question. It just came to mind. It's like, I got you on here. Why not ask? Have you ever seen any type of psychosymptomatic correlation with cancerous cells? I know it's like kind of out there, but I thought I'd just bring it up.
Yeah, I would say we don't do enough studies on these, but I would say 100%. There are people that I've come across that feel so strongly that certain positive attitudes really can make a difference. And I know people at this moment in time that they want to focus their energies and research and their time and their expertise on just that. How do we create an environment where people can fight cancer and boost it with a more positive space for them? And you hear cancer patients talking about this all the time, and they feel so strongly that for some of them that have beat their cancer, it was really much of it they attribute to their attitude.
Yeah, and I know people personally that have survived it. I know people, unfortunately, that haven't. Majority of them had positive attitudes, and I know the ones that are still here today by far, they just had the right mindset. And I'm not saying that to say that if you don't, you're not going to get better, or you don't stand a chance. It's just I have seen that happen time and time again. It's really
there's something to be
awe-inspiring.
said. But at the same time, those that aren't doing well, we can't blame them or point fingers. Well, you're not positive, and then that happens too, and that's unfair.
Right.
Because there's some of it that much of cancer we can't help, we can't control. We don't have the grasp on it.
Well, and my best friend, who's no longer with us, his fight for 10 years on and off was just textbook Herculean. I mean, total hero. It was just unbelievable, and he didn't make it. So there's that side of it too. And I've lived through that. I've seen that. But that's interesting that you kind of feel similar to what I proposed, as far as, there being a correlation there.
Yeah. And it's true. I think our communities, our medical community, and by and large dismisses it, but yet it's real. There's
Right.
something that is real. And I like I said, I am not a clinician myself, but I listen to stories from people, but I also listen to stories from innovators who think there's something there and want to work on it, and researchers.
Well, that's
So
interesting. That's
yeah,
interesting. I'd like personally, I'd like to see more go into that and see, what comes of that type of research.
yeah, absolutely. Um,
Well, this has been great. I've got a thing that I like doing at the end, but we'll get to that in a second. I'll ask you this. I'll throw this one in. Your personal philosophy on medicine, if you wanted to elaborate for a minute or two on that.
yeah, I think my personal philosophy on medicine is that I truly believe part of it needs to be about our own, we need to take responsibility in part for our own health and be healthy,
Hmm.
right? And I think we don't, as a culture, I don't think we necessarily look at our health as an asset, as perhaps the most important asset we have. And if you actually thought about your health as an asset, you would invest in it.
Yeah.
It would be the first thing. And in fact, if you actually thought about your health as the most important asset, and that all other assets don't mean much, without your health, you would do everything you could to invest in it. Whether it be, all the preventative stuff, the physical activity, the eating healthy, you'd spend every dollar you could and all your time and effort, your energy, your knowledge in a more healthy person. Um, so I think that gets ignored. I honestly think it gets ignored, as part of the medicine and what we know medicine to be. But really, medicine must be that intervention, right? When you are healthy, but then you get confronted with something and your body can't deal with it, medicine needs to be that intervention, but it can't be that constant band-aid. If
Right.
you
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's the way I see it. And yet, too many of us look to medicine as the band-aid. And if you go to CVS, Walgreens, or any of those, there's just lines out with how many people just are on prescription drugs. Maybe that's unnecessary. Maybe we need to work harder in some way to, um, have a balance. And that balance, like you were just talking about, isn't necessarily just eating right and, doing exercise. It's also sleeping. It's also the stress and our ability to control stress, and not let it impact us as best as we can, and come up with ways to deal with our mental health, as part of the package of medicine, right?
We've had guests on the show, and multiple times this type of discussion has percolated, and it's always come down. And my main question that I always ask is, why was I not learning about this stuff in high school? You had a couple of really high level. Let me rephrase that. You had a couple of really sensitive educators or teachers that kind of injected it into the curriculum without perhaps folks higher up on the hierarchy knowing. And thank God for them, because they really, just small things like just introducing Myers-Briggs in a choir class. Like literally, I had a high school teacher who did that, and just talk about mindfulness, talk about um, uh, mental health to a certain degree, and it's like, well, why do we have to sneak this in? Why can't this be something on a blocked out schedule, like a required, mandatory? It's just so important.
Yeah, and we have so much knowledge, and we need a health and self-improvement component to education. including even small things like, imagine if we just took the sugar out of the diets of our children,
Yeah.
Take out sodas, take out even cereals. I mean, they're just full of sugar, so much more so than when I was growing up, right? It's just and people say we have a very strong sugar lobby, so everything has sugar in it. And I feel like maybe Michelle Obama tried to tackle that a little bit. It's just not enough.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. It's baffling to me. I mean, the whole thing is just and even, and I don't know if you've read any, you'll probably crack up, but Gene Simmons has some books out and they're really interesting. And one of them, well, actually all of them, he touches a little bit on just basic budgeting in high school. Like, why are we not teaching this to our young people? And I would say that the two things that really need to be instilled in kind of middle school and high school: budgeting and mental health and wellness. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Agree.
but that's just my opinion. I'm not, I'm speaking from a personality standpoint. This has been great. I have the little section at the end I like doing called the shootout, which is just I say a word that's industry related to the guest, and you just kind of fire the first word that comes back. There's no right or wrong answers. It's just kind of fun to see where things go.
Okay.
Music.
People.
That's good. Song.
Feelings.
Art.
Expression.
Science.
Solutions.
That's good. Research.
Knowledge.
Lab.
Work.
Biochemistry.
Science.
Entrepreneurship.
Struggle.
New York.
Lights.
Yeah. And the most important one, pizza.
Italian.
I have one last question for you that I ask everybody, which is, if you could go back in time to your 15-year-old self, knowing what you know now, what would you tell her?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. No one's ever asked me that, but I would have a lot to say, I think. I think I would say to myself is to keep believing in myself, in my own sort of core. I think we all still have our core. We all have a core about us, and it gets it's really easy to get strayed from what you know about who you are and about who you are in the world. So I would say, keep believing in that, because I guess there were so many moments in my journey where I wasn't supposed to do this, or I didn't have enough of that in order to become, this. And I stuck to it, and it with struggle, and it was painful. But I wish someone would have said, don't worry about it. You're going to get there. This dream is for you as well. You don't have to fit into this box in order to have that dream, if you know what I mean.
Sure.
Including something like sound effects, which was not well received when I launched it. It was pure struggle, and it took a lot of me growing as a leader to hold it, to keep this belief and hold what I saw real and true. And in a certain way, it was ahead of its time, because I launched it before we had crowd movements, and then we had crowd movements, and it made more sense. And I launched it before people were becoming more intimate with science and innovation. And then, like I said, with this Corona, the whole thing just pushed it over the edge. And now the public has become very sensitized to solutions and the need for it, and in their lives. And as you and I are speaking, and the idea that health, without our health, everything else is just secondary.
My mother is a retired nurse. Well, actually, she's technically not retired because she still keeps up with her continuing ed. But she veteran nurse, literally, in the military and then outside of the military in the private sector. And she always has told me, if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. Like, the health is
Yeah.
first and most important. And so I totally agree with you with that.
Yeah. So
I want to thank you again for your time. And as a sound effects artist myself, thank you for the platform. It's been really great just having that outlet to just do something for the good of humanity and be able to connect with other artists that have a similar mindset. And I really am excited to see where this is going to continue to move. And again, it's very commendable that you guys have been around for over 5-6 years at this point. That's, as a startup, we've all, any entrepreneur
yeah.
who's been there knows those are the crucial years. And if you can kind of outlive those first 5 years, it's pretty promising. So
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And it's true, it's so easy to quit. Quitting would have been the easy way. But I would say, I have to say, there are people like you that helped me keep it going, and still believed in it and hung in there. And, it's, when you're in this situation where you're sort of holding the ship, steering the ship, in the rocky waters, you look to the people that are believing in you and believing in what you're about and what the organization's about. And there may not be so many, but even like someone like you and your parents meant a lot to me. So I thank you as well for you have played a role in our sustainability, and hopefully sound effects will simply grow and blossom from here.
well, thank you again for coming on the show. And you have any last words beyond that?
I want everybody here to stay safe, and I love the theme of protecting your health,
Yeah.
because as we said, well, without that, what else is there? And sort of having this podcast to raise awareness around that, and music really to be also part of sharing this, because music is really that thing that brings people together. And it's not just now, right? Music has existed since the beginning of what we understand time, and has always been used to move crowds, galvanize crowds, get them together, share new ideas. It is an extremely powerful tool. So if you're someone who is a musician, be responsible with this tool, and use it for positive change.
The universal language.
Yes.
For sure. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you.
You guys been watching and listening to the Jason Damico show. Definitely check out Sound Effects' information. And I forgot to bring this up, but we will have all the links in the description box below on YouTube, or to the sides on iTunes, Spotify, iHeart, and all those platforms. Definitely check out the website as well as their social media. Give them a like, give them a follow. And fellow artists out there, if you want to get involved, definitely hit up Sound Effects, because they're always looking for new folks to be on the team.
Thank you so much, Jason.
We will see you guys on the next one. Peace.
Bye-bye.